Between 2013 and 2021, I wrote over 583,000 words of fan fiction. That's equal to roughly 5 to 7 full-length novels. So, what did those many years of fan fiction writing teach me about writing in general? Hello, beautiful people of the internet. How are you doing today? My name is Jackie and welcome back to my YouTube channel. So today, this is a video idea I've had for a long time, and here I am finally filming it. What did my very long fan fiction writing career teach me about writing? So, like I said, between 2013, when I was 14 years old, and 2021, when I was 22 years old, I wrote roughly 5 to 7 full-length novels worth of fan fiction in various fandoms. And that's not including the really bad Glee fan fiction I wrote when I was 12. I did not go back and look at that fanfiction.net account because I think if I had, I might have lost the will to live, because I know what I wrote when I was 12 was probably atrocious, but that's besides the point. But now, here I am, about to turn 24 years old, and I have already completed draft 1 of my first full-length original novel. I really think all of the years that I spent writing fan fiction helped me grow as a writer and end up where I am now. So in this video, I wanted to share some of the writing lessons and life lessons that fan fiction taught me. Number 1. Outlining is very important. Now, there are many kinds of writers, and different writers have different opinions on this. Personally, over the course of my fanfiction writing career, I learned that having an outline is necessary if I want to finish a story. Different people have different styles, and what works for me may not work for you. However, a valuable lesson that I learned over the course of writing fanfiction is that I am definitely an architect / a plotter. In the past, when I would start writing a multi-chapter fan fiction, I would go in without an outline. I would know the beginning of the story and I would know where I wanted to end up, but the middle was a little murky. And what happened every single time is I would get to the middle, I would not really be sure what was happening, and then I would never finish the story. I would leave it incomplete forever. But once I started outlining my stories, I was able to successfully complete multi-chapter works. They didn't have to be very detailed outlines. I could just write a little description of each chapter I was planning to write, saying the major events that were going to happen in that chapter. I didn't need to know every single detail, but I just needed to have a plan about how I was going to get from point A to point B. With the novel I just finished drafting, I really basically just made a numbered list from 1 to 40, and I wrote for each chapter where the scene was going to be set and what key information needed to be revealed in that chapter. That was all that I needed, and after I did that, I was able to successfully complete the first draft of the story. Different things work for different writers, so don't feel like you need to copy my technique, but I do think a valuable thing I learned from writing fan fiction is I learned more about myself and my own personal writing preferences. Because I spent all these years writing fanfic, I now know what I need to have success as a writer and complete a story. Now, the second thing that I learned from writing fan fiction is when you're writing a story with multiple chapters, do not skip ahead to write the most exciting scenes first. This is very, very tempting. You know, sometimes there's a scene you're just so excited to write that scene and you want to do it right now. However, I've found that for myself, that's generally speaking not a good idea, because when I would skip, you know, maybe I didn't know what was going to happen in chapter 5 exactly, but I knew chapter 7 was going to be really exciting, so I'll just skip 5 and 6 and get right to 7. But then once 7 was done and I had to go back to 5 and 6, I would not feel really motivated to write those chapters at all. And even this past year, as I was drafting this novel I wrote, I was having this problem again where I would be writing a chapter and I wasn't quite exactly sure how the chapter was going to go, but I knew what I was going to do in the next chapter. There was that temptation to just skip this for now and go to the next chapter where I had a better idea of what was going to happen. However, I think it's much better just to power through the parts that you're not as sure about before getting to the exciting parts. The thing is, you can always edit a chapter and add more detail later or make it more exciting later, but you cannot edit something that hasn't been written yet. I also personally think writing your story in chronological order is going to save you a lot of time when you're editing and revising, because it makes it less likely for you to accidentally contradict yourself. If I jump straight ahead to chapter 7 and then I go back and write chapters 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, time will have passed and I may have forgotten the things that I already wrote in chapter 7. So maybe when I wrote chapter 7 first, I said it was nighttime, but then when I finally get to chapter 6, it's suddenly the morning, even though not that much time is supposed to have passed between the two chapters. I think you also prevent serious continuity issues a lot of the time when you go chronologically through your manuscript. Again, how you write your story is up to you, but my fan fiction writing career taught me that this was the most effective method for me. Number 3, you can't please everyone. Now, I, as a person, am very sensitive. I am too sensitive, and I definitely think I could develop a thicker skin and be more assertive. So dealing with criticisms of my work is something that I am constantly working towards being better at, because even though I logically know I can't please everyone in the world, when someone does give me negative feedback, it does just cause my heart to have that little tiny pang, and then I have a little internal crisis. So I do think a valuable lesson I learned from writing fan fiction is that you're always going to have people who don't like what you do. You can try to please everyone, you can constantly try to get better, but the fact of the matter is that there's nothing in this world that is universally liked. So if your goal is to have absolutely zero criticism, that's not a realistic goal. When I was in college, I wrote 2 Game of Thrones fan fictions that were novel length. In fact, they were actually over novel length because, generally speaking, the publishing industry recommends that a novel should be between 80,000 and 100,000 words, and these 2 Game of Thrones fan fictions were over 100,000 words each, and I actually wrote both of them in 1 year and 11 days while being a full-time college student. I don't know how I did it. George R.R. Martin, if you need help with The Winds of Winter, call me. All jokes aside, I am going somewhere with this. That was a very popular fandom to write fan fiction about. There's probably millions of Game of Thrones fan fictions on the internet, and since I was writing for such a popular fandom, I received lots of comments on these fanfics. They were probably the most popular fan fictions I ever wrote. And while I received lots of amazing positive comments, I also received some negative and at times pretty rude comments from people telling me I made a continuity error, I was factually inaccurate, my interpretation of such and such a character was not the correct interpretation, and let me tell you why I'm right and you're wrong. Some of them were kind of hurtful, and others were a little bit funny, to be honest. I remember one person berated me, saying that my interpretation of this character was completely wrong, going off on a tangent about how if I read the books, I would understand that they were actually like this. And had this person kept reading the fanfiction, they would have found that just 1 or 2 chapters after that, I wrote a scene that completely agreed with their interpretation. But because they didn't keep reading and just wanted to tell me why I was wrong, they didn't get to that part. It was mean, but also kind of funny. So I think the valuable life lesson I learned from this is that Lots of people have different opinions, and there are some people you just can't make happy no matter how hard you try. There are lots of people out there who think that they are always right, and they will tell you why they are right and you are wrong. And also, there are some people who just have different tastes, and maybe they don't mean to be mean about it, but your story is just not going to be the story for them. That is okay. It's normal. There are a lot of popular things out there that personally don't do it for me, but that doesn't mean that the story isn't good for other people. And when you write a book or a TV show or a fan fiction or a story of any kind, there are going to be people who don't like it. But there are also going to be many people who do love your story. There is going to be someone out there in the world whose favorite story of all time is your story. And those are the people you're writing your story for, not the people who are going to say that it was bad or tell you what you did wrong. For every person who dislikes your story, there's going to be someone who absolutely adores it, and that's really what matters. Which brings me to lesson 4. Write what you want to write. There is an audience for it. I've shared this story in my writing vlogs, but I'm going to share it again. After I wrote those 2 novel-length Game of Thrones fanfictions, I decided that I was going to try to write an original novel in hopes of being published. However, I tried 2 different story ideas and neither of them were really working for me. One of them I wrote, I don't remember how many pages, but a pretty significant chunk of the story, and I realized I wasn't really happy with it. I kept trying to get excited about it and it wasn't really working. So I then switched to another story idea, but I was only able to write, I think, about 5 chapters of that one in an entire year, and then I gave up that idea too. The reason why these ideas weren't really working for me was because I wasn't writing the story that I really wanted to write. I was writing what I thought people wanted. I was trying to write contemporary thrillers with unlikable characters, massive plot twists, and unreliable narrators because that's what I thought the general public wanted. I thought that if I wrote a story like that, that was going to give me the best chance at getting published. The problem is I wasn't having a lot of fun writing those stories, and that's why I wasn't able to see them through to the finish. It's all well and good to try to come up with a marketable story idea, but if you're not passionate about the story, you're going to have a really hard time writing it. So what I did next is I decided I was going to pivot. In the past couple of years, I have discovered that I love mystery novels and I love historical mysteries. Now, that genre is not as popular as contemporary thrillers, for instance. It's a little more niche. However, I decided I was going to give it a try, and I was going to write a historical mystery set in one of my personal favorite historical time periods. And guess what happened? I was able to finish the entire draft between July and January, something I was never able to do with my previous story ideas. And what changed was the interest I had in the story I was telling. I was not thinking about what was marketable or what was going to make me famous. I was thinking, what is a book that I would love to read? That's the book that I'm going to write. And I did it. I finished the draft, and now I am working on the second draft, editing and revising what I wrote. Now, is my story going to be a story for everyone? No, there's going to be some people who are not interested in reading a historical mystery. They want to read contemporary thrillers with a lot of action and adventure and plot twists and unlikable main characters. And that's fine, because that's the kind of story that interests them. But this is the kind of story that interests me. And because it interests me, there are going to hopefully be lots of people out there in the world who are also going to be interested in it. Like I said earlier, there are going to be people who don't like your story. But there's also going to be people who love your story, who say it's the best book they've ever read. So don't try to please other people, just try to please yourself. and hopefully success will follow. Ultimately, you have to be true to yourself, write something that interests you, because even if it seems extremely niche, there are going to be people out there in the world who are interested in the same things as you. Just think about it. If you go to fanfiction.net or Archive of Our Own, there are so many different fandoms that you can read about on there. In popular fandoms, there might be millions of fanfictions, and you'll find that people have written fanfictions about lots of different relationships and with lots of different tropes. Whatever your favorite trope is, you can find fanfictions on the internet that include that trope. You can find ones about this really specific ship that like actually has no romantic relationship in the actual canon, but there will be a very vocal fan base online who are advocating for this pairing and creating stories about them. Even if you have an interest that is maybe not as mainstream or popular, there are other people out there who share that interest, and those are the target audience for your story. And number 5, the final lesson that I learned from writing fan fiction was that I have it in me to complete a novel. Let's stop and think about this for a second. Between 2013 and 2021, I wrote so many words of fan fiction that it equals 5 to 7 full-length novels. I was doing all of this for free in my own personal time while also attending high school and college. So, if I could do that, what was stopping me from writing an original novel? Clearly, if I wanted to make the time, I could make the time. The only thing that was stopping me was my own self-doubt and my belief that I couldn't do it. There are people out there who make fun of fan fiction writing. They think it's a weird hobby, and they think that people who write fan fiction aren't good writers. But to be completely honest with you, I've read so many fan works that were really well written, and while reading them, I thought to myself, God, this person should write a novel. And I think writing fan fiction is just great practice, and it's a great way to build your confidence in yourself and your own abilities. Back when I first started doing this, I knew that I wanted to be a writer someday, but I thought that I was too young or that I wasn't good enough to actually write my own book. Over the years, I was able to look back at my accomplishments and my growth as a writer, and finally that caused me to realize that the only thing holding me back from pursuing this lifelong dream was my own belief in my inadequacy. If I could write 200,000 words in 1 year in 11 days, what was stopping me from creating my own world and my own story and my own characters? Honestly, I believe it was all those years I spent on the internet writing these little stories and getting feedback from other people that made it possible for me to achieve what I have achieved now as a 23 going on 24-year-old woman. So all in all, I think that I learned a lot of valuable lessons from this chapter in my life, and I am able to take those lessons and become a better writer because of it. So everyone, those are 5 things that writing fan fiction taught me about myself and writing in general. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more from me. I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday. My social media links are in the description if you want to follow me on Tumblr, Instagram, or be my friend on Goodreads. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you have a magical rest of your day. Bye, and I'll see you next time.